Well, welcome to another episode of Download the Internet, and today we're going to be discussing that of 3D printing, kind of a how-to. But before we get into like how-to, I'd like to just talk about like some of the philosophy on 3D printing itself, as well as like anything that's community driven. It could be open source software. It could be, that of community software and the like, or even as simple as modifications of software. And the philosophy is that it's something that's community made, it's something that's made by its users, it's something that's developed by its users, that's actually there's care and thought put into it by the actual people that made it, and it's not just for profit. It's for the users itself. Here at Download the Internet, while we're here not against making profit, we're very much about community projects and works and whatnot. And why 3D printing and specifically, as well as open source software and the like. And I lump them into this category of community built things for a reason. So 3D printing, there's a lot of things you can do with 3D printing. It's more versatile than you think, and it's easier to get in than you actually think. It's a little daunting at first, certainly, and there's definitely like a learning curve, and that's definitely going to keep a lot of people from adopting it. But I feel like it's going to be the next adopted thing, and I look towards Bitcoin as kind of a similar thing where Bitcoin, even though, not everybody buys into Bitcoin, and there are definitely people in the Bitcoin world that are just using it to kind of get rich quick or whatever, make a lot of money off of it, pump and dump schemes and the like. But it's something that was developed, it's community developed. It was not developed by a corporation. It was developed by a very small community, and people, most of them, or the creator itself, would somewhat still considered unknown, though. Some think they actually do know the identity. I'm not even about to go into that. Uh, but it has since then become very much so a uh, but Bitcoin has, over the years, become very much adopted by a much more normie tier, mass audience than would, just 10 years ago. And now it even has companies such as Binance and Coinbase that have now basically become the bank of cryptocurrency. Now, this video has nothing to do with cryptocurrency whatsoever, but I just feel that in the same line, uh, I just feel like in the same spirit as cryptocurrency, so is 3D printing. There's a lot you can actually do with 3D printing. Um, there's a lot of simple household things you can make, and it doesn't require even knowing how to create things, which I'm going to show you how to create things for 3D printing, but you don't even have to know that. There are plenty of websites you can just go and actually download the files you need and then begin printing. So let's go over some prerequisites you're going to need. So of course, first you're going to need an actual 3D printer itself. The 3D printer is not as expensive as you would expect. You can find them between like really high quality ones between 200 $400. Like you can even find some for $500, and that's a fully enclosed 3D printer. And just starting off, you're not gonna need anything with an enclosure. For me, my recommended one is the one I use is any of the Ender printers. So the Ender, you know, the one I actually have is this one right here, Ender 3, and it's only $139. And you can print quite a lot on that. It actually has quite, if you think of a box, the actual width of that box that you can actually print inside here, the actual size of that, right, is 250 millimeters by 220 millimeters by 220 millimeters. That's XYZ, right, shown here, right? That's a lot of space. There's a lot you can actually print inside that safe zone there, and there's a lot you can work in, and there's a lot of various things, you know, just going on. We'll go Thingiverse. There's a lot of very fascinating things. This is the place I recommend just going to first to find a bunch of ideas or just various things to look for. Um, and these are some of my favorite things right here that to get starting off with. You have the 3D printed calipers and 3D printed tools for actually measurement and various other things. Yeah, precision measuring tools. This is an excellent start to like 3D printing, and you know, you could print very small things and start out with, you know, right here you can download all of this, readily available for download, free to get started. Um, Really excellent way to start getting into 3D printing itself. Um, Once you have that, the next thing I would recommend getting, once you have like your printer, once you have items to print, we'll learn. I'm gonna go over some like how to design things using FreeCAD is the best. You could use Blender or something like Blender. Um, but I highly recommend a CAD application. If you have Autodesk, you somehow have access to real CAD, not free CAD, some proprietary version of that, you could definitely use that. But for most people, like myself included, we do not have access to um, proprietary CAD. So we're just going to computer aided design. That's what that CAD stands for. So we're just going to use free CAD. But before we go into that, Prusa Slicer is another thing you're going to need. There's more than just Prusa. So here you can download the latest Prusa Slicer, which is, there's many other different free available slicers. This is my favorite. So what you're going to need is once you actually get your file, whatever it is you're downloading, you're going to need to then slice that using your slicer. I recommend Slicer. It turns whatever it is, if it is a step file or if it is a STL file, whatever file it happens to be, it turns that into something the printer can actually read and can actually print from. Again, I recommend Prusa. It's the one I use. It's extremely good. It has of um, a lot of things it allows you to do. Once you get your printer, once you know, have some downloadable files, once you have your slicer, of course, you're also going to need your 3D filament, which you're going to need to make sure that it's the correct. Make sure it's the correct width for yours. If you have a beginner, yours is going to be 1.75 millimeter. Um, a lot of printers are more advanced printers are going to be that 2 millimeter, 2 point whatever, something millimeter. I forgot the size of that one, but it's a thicker gauge wire. Most likely, if you order a more simplistic, yeah, 2.85 millimeter is going to be for a more advanced printer, be able to put down more deposition per layer. But most likely you're going to be using If you get a beginner printer, it's going to be most likely 1.75 millimeter filament, PLA, plastic. Highly recommend that. It's a good starting filament. Alright. Alright, so once we have our filament and our slicer, I'm going to show you what Prusa Slicer actually looks like here. So this is Prusa Slicer. It's already got my platter on here for the Ender 3 because that's my particular printer, but you can add a printer. You would go to the configuration wizard, and then select your printer here by checking this box, whether printer you have. For me, the box checked here is the Ender 3 because that's what I print on. And so once you get through that wizard, it's going to show you this right here. Once you have that, you're going to actually go to import and import your STL, OBJ, whatever it is, file. Got mine. I'm going to import this object I made in CAD right here, just a simple example of object made in CAD to STL straight to my 3D printer. And so here we're going to have, you can add another object to this. You could delete objects from this on the print settings. Here you can actually move the object on its location on the platter. For the most part, you're not going to need this unless there's some issue with the object itself being placed in its location. But most likely that's not going to be the case. We're not going to scale. This actually is a scale. We're going to Command Z. You're never going to need to do that, hopefully. It does have here on this an actual scale, and you can actually see in millimeters the scale, but if you're creating this in CAD, there's no need to actually have this, but it's an option that you can actually do. Rotation, it may be helpful to rotate it for whatever reason. This one is probably going to be the most useful in case it imports your object upside down, like say the object accidentally got imported upside down like that. This is an excellent tool. It's place on face tool, so you can just flip that right around. Very easy, because this is the side you're going to want to print on. You're going to want the least amount of complications for your printer. Okay, so for me, I have mine set on Prusa Slicer, set on expert, so I can actually go in and edit a lot of this stuff. But when you first start out, you're going to need just simple. You can select your filament, generic PLA, pretty good. They have some other Creality PLA, and the like, but generic, get the job done. Of course, your printer, of course, your actual nozzles, the size of your nozzle itself, whatever nozzle size you got on. If you don't know what's on your printer, might as well get out the wrench and take off the nozzle if you can't read it from the printer itself and see what you got, because this is important. If it's a 8mm nozzle, which I doubt you'll have that, you'll want that, 16mm, whatever. Alright, so once you have that, you can then go over here, which is always a good rule of thumb on Prusa. I don't know, every other slicers I've had in the past didn't have this preview setting, which is why I really like Prusa Slicer specifically, because this one actually allows you to go layer by layer, all the way down to the base, what it's going to look like. And it'll give you this tool right here, which will show you the nozzle. It'll actually show you the Gcode being executed and each individual step. Why would you need this? It would be helpful to see how it's going to print. One of the reasons later on you'll see is when you go down, if you might have made a mistake, you actually may need more deposition and fill in there, more infill, then you can go and change that. That's going to be in your advanced or expert settings, and you're going to actually see your infill set at 50%. You could go all the way to 100, which I don't recommend. There's typically no reason to have the fill density that much. If you don't want a grid pattern, you could change it to rectilinear, which will look like that, which I don't recommend. Not for this print, but you could change it. That grid will work well enough. You can do filament settings, of course. This is more helpful in PLA. Typically will print with the generic settings easily enough. When you start getting into ABS or other printer settings, you're going to need to start actually changing this and changing the bed temperature. Maybe not, but in my experience, you'll have to start actually changing with the nozzle temperature and the bed temperature, and layer temperature, like your first layer temperature, then your other layer temperatures, and start actually using more advanced metrics in here. Alright, so now that we got that, there we go. So you see it changed on us, and so we're back to our grid, since we had changed that over to see what it would look like. Alright, so once you have that, you're going to go here, you're going to export Gcode, and then it'll tell you where you can export it, etc. It's going to need to be a Gcode file. And a Gcode file, the reason you use a slicer is the Gcode file needs to know the size of your print bed. You're going to want to see the size of your print bed. It needs to be something that this can actually read. While most printers will be able to read from Gcode, this will actually have all the parameters set for you, so there's less guesswork, or very little guesswork. In fact, there's no guesswork. You know exactly how it's going to look on the bed. I don't know why I said that. Alright, good to go. So I guess again, in wrapping up, why should you get into 3D printing? This is why I am so big into 3D printing myself, and an advocate for it, is because 3D printing is all the things you can actually make with 3D printing. You can make toys, you can make household items, scientific items, laboratory items, home lab items, home cleaning supplies, and various other things that you may need around the house. It's just an all-around a good it's more than a hobby. It's a good thing to learn how to use, and it's to me it's more than just hobbyist tinker toy. This is something that I truly believe you can adopt as into your life as much as you would adopt a laundry machine into your house. It's just, you would have your laundry machine, you would have a dishwasher, you would buy a 3D printer. Like, to me, it's just on that level of practicality.